It is a brand new year and a new beginning, and with that new beginning, we are coming to an ending of Richard Linklater's Before trilogy. Yes, we're back with 2013's Before Midnight, starring Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, and written by Richard Linklater, Ethan Hawke, and Julie Delpy. Uh, I watched this movie this afternoon, and I feel like I'm still working through it. I was a big fan of Noah Baumbach's divorce, not divorce story, marriage story. Should have been called divorce story from was a couple years ago now, but I was getting serious flashbacks to that watching this movie. But that came out like 6 years before Marriage Story, so I'm thoroughly turned around and confused. So let's start at the beginning. Sujewa, welcome back. We're going to talk about, of course. Before Midnight. But before we get to that, I would like to catch up with an update of your film, The Secret Society for Slow Romance. Where are things at?
Awesome. Thanks for having us. Well, thanks for having the show back. Alia is out today, but she'll be back for the February episode where we'll talk about our movie, The Secret Society for Slow Romance. The things are good. Editing. My schedule is editing, sleeping, and eating. That's my daily schedule these days.
You're living the life.
That's right. Very close to the end, but every shot requires effects, sound mixing, sound effects, titles for the whole movie. So there's a lot of little things to finish up. I hope to finish it this week and start submitting to film festivals.
So you're for all of that kind of post shooting work, are you doing all of this yourself, I take it?
Mm-hmm.
Or is there anything that are you getting help on, like farming anything out, or you're just cranking on the whole deal?
Yeah, usually post is done by a team of people, but on small projects, one person can do it. And on this one, I'm doing it. Yeah, I didn't even think about getting a team on it because I did all the post work for the previous one, for Werewolf Ninja Philosopher. So I'm pretty used to doing all the post myself now. But yeah, it depends on the project. If it's a bigger project with a tight deadline, I might get some help. It's just separating the shots took forever.
So in that, I mean, you finished filming a little bit ago, and you've been editing and doing all this stuff on the movie. Has anything changed, or are you seeing it in a new way, or is it still pretty much you've got your vision, it's locked in, and you're just going about the business of fully realizing it?
I assembled some pieces together, some scenes together, and did added the music, and it played a lot faster than I expected. So I'm
Oh,
happy with how things are looking. So it's gonna be, even though a fan of slow cinema is making it, it might, it might move at a fast clip. Yeah, especially with the music underneath. I'm gonna have music underneath the dialogue because they're hanging out. There's some music playing. That's the setup. Yeah, and I love how the footage looks. Even though it's just two people talking, it's gonna be exciting.
cool. All right.
So I haven't gone, oh no, this is terrible. Let's stop work on it.
Well, that's good because you invest a lot of heart and soul and resources into that. I'm excited to see it, and yeah, hopefully we'll be able to give it a full showcase next month. I know we've got a movie. Is next month the Godard film? I can't remember. I don't even have my own schedule pulled up, but
uh, it may be, but yeah, let's do a full episode on that, at least an hour.
yeah. So we'll
After you see the movie, you may have a lot of questions.
Oh, I guarantee I'll have a lot of questions, a lot of things to talk about, and having Alia there to talk about her experience, also her experience of having watched the final film and get her reaction to it
Mm-hmm.
will be very exciting. But yeah, as a teaser, we're going to be talking likely about a Godard film. We kind of have to now because we've teased it,
Mm-hmm.
and then it'll be like a double feature. We'll talk
Sure.
about slow romance and then Godard.
Yeah,
Uh,
hour and a half. It'll be good. Good. It's either a Godard or it's Waking Life, maybe. But I think it's Godard.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, it might have been Waking Life
Alphaville.
too, because that's another Linklater film.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah. So anything else you want to share about Slow Romance before we move on to Before Midnight?
Let me think. No, a lot of interesting things. Yeah, I don't have anything special to talk about at the moment. But yeah, it's coming along. And once the editing is done, I'll make some notes about how to talk about it to the media, and then I'll have like a full-on media spiel next time.
Okay. Actually, I have one question.
Yeah.
Your regimen, what's the ratio there of editing or like post work to sleep to eating, like out of your
Well,
day?
on top of that, we have to add just errands, essential to do stuff, and some work for clients because apparently bills still need to get paid. So
What?
yeah. So editing, it's tough to get more than 4 hours a day of editing in, and sometimes, an entire hour could be spent me moving some clips around, seeing, oh, how does that look? How does this look? So, yeah, it's not. Unfortunately, it's not a fast process. It's the slowest writing, and it's the slowest shooting. Um, for this one, maybe I won't shoot so much for the next movie, and maybe I'll use like a clapper, a slate for each shot.
I can imagine that'd be a challenge.
Yeah,
Um,
this one it took forever to separate the shots.
one other thing, because you mentioned you're working on stuff for clients.
Hmm.
Uh, how do you prioritize that during your regular work day? Do you work on the client stuff first, or do you work on your passion project first to get that kind of energy expended to satisfy that itch to get that work done? Or do you put the stuff that pays the bills first and then kind of relax with slow romance?
Well, for film work, it'll eventually make some money, but so that I take it partially as regular work.
Hmm.
But yeah, you don't want to rush it, so I save that to late night or overnight. And you sometimes I'm up till 4 or 5 in the morning. Then I sleep till about 12, 1, 2, get up. Then I do the client stuff till about 5, 6, whatever, and then I go to film editing. But during until the movie is edited, I've put off as many other things as possible. Things I need to do, other money making stuff, and stuff for clients. So my head's clear, and that's the main thing. Once editing is done, I'll start fundraising, looking for donations, getting more client work done. So maybe by end of February, no, end of January, I'll be back up to normal speed. Yeah, it's always a challenge dividing up time. Some days I just put off everything and I just edit because certain problems need to be thought out while editing, and it's tough to do that if you're thinking about lots of other things.
Yeah.
It's a
Y-
very focused, very attention consuming thing, editing.
Yeah. I know in the very limited stuff I've done in Premiere for a video essay I did a couple months ago, it takes a long time. Well, partially it's because my computer's really slow, but but yeah, you just want to get everything right
Hmm.
and have everything in its place. You just unwittingly answered a question for me. A lot of mornings I get up and I'll see a message or a text from
Hmm.
you. And I'm like, oh, he gets up just as early as I do because I'm up at 4 o'clock in the morning. But no, that's when you're about ready to go to bed.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. I'm up from the previous day. Over here at this apartment, Amanda goes to sleep by 12 usually. Then it's very quiet, and the neighborhood is quiet. That's the best time for my writing and editing.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm usually I'm working like in the middle of like the morning to the middle of the day, but yeah, I get up at 4 o'clock to have the first couple hours before the kids wake up of that
Hmm.
precious time. Yeah. All
Yeah,
right.
it's tough with having people around.
It very much is.
Yeah,
And now with the pandemic, someone is usually always around.
that's right. We need when we're wealthier, we'll get cabins far away from
Yes,
people, and like a helicopter to fly us there really fast and back.
I like that. Yeah, it's good. It's good motivation to get wealthy.
That's
Um,
right. How's your job hunt going?
it's going. I've got a
Awesome.
couple of lines in the water. I actually signed a freelance writing contract with a company to be doing some it's like casino gambling, like journalism and articles for them. So that
Wild.
it should be pretty steady work, and it's kind of in my wheelhouse from my previous job.
That
Um,
should be interesting.
Yeah, I've got a couple of pieces up already and working on some more, but it's a whole different kind of beast. I actually ordered, just came yesterday. Let me
Hmm.
pull this up, the Associated Press style book
Nice.
because I want to be this 700-page beast. I got to make my way through.
Awesome.
So I feel like I'm back in college, but
Your writing will be proper according to
well,
the guidebook.
well, that's the thing is I like to pride myself on being proper, but I really want to dig in and get all the nuances down
Hmm. Oh,
because
let me
there's
show you something that came in the mail. CinemaScope. They're still publishing in print 4 issues from Canada, $20 for people in the U.S. So lots of interesting stuff.
so is that four issues for
Various film stuff.
is that 4 issues for $20?
4 issues for $20.
That's great. Is it a quarterly or something?
Yeah, quarterly.
All right.
Lots of film stuff.
I think I saw.
Look, yeah, have your place look nice by having a print magazine.
They will never go out of style.
That's right. It makes a difference. It feels more real and more interesting.
Oh yeah, especially a magazine. I love those big, oversized, magazines too. It's like a newspaper
I feel more
back when they're
accomplished
bulky.
with it in my on my little table.
Well, as you should.
That's right.
All right, so let's talk about Before Midnight.
Yeah, you're still reeling from it.
I am. It's the longest of the trilogy, I think.
Is it?
Mm-hmm. Because the other ones were like just around an hour and a half long, and this is pushing 2, and that's not a complaint. It's something that I noticed when I was trying to schedule it in my viewing, because I got a lot of long movies coming up this week to watch, like really long. So I'm like, oh, I'll put in Before Midnight. It's gonna be, I'll be in and out in an hour and 20, and then I saw it's like an hour 48 or something. Like,
Wow.
oh, this is interesting, and I really dug it because
Good.
as this is the third movie of its kind, in a trilogy that we've watched in like 3 months. So there's kind of a concern that, okay, it's just going to be, Delpy and Hawke walking around another European location, talking about life. And those have been great movies. I'm a fan of this series. Don't get me wrong, but it was just nice to be kind of thrown off by this really long half-hour setup of their life in Greece and what are they doing there, what's happened in the last 8 years since we caught up with these characters. Our last conversation, I was very concerned because it looked like Jesse, Ethan Hawke's character, was about to throw away his marriage and wife and kids back in the States to be with Céline. And indeed, that's what happens. You fast forward 8 years or so, and they've got twins, and Jesse has got a very kind of troubled relationship with his son, who's about to enter high school, and all sorts of complications. The relationship with Céline has taken some definite turns, and we see the kind of the dark side to the lovey-dovey two crazy 20-somethings meeting on a train 20 years ago to what happens when real life kind of catches up with that. I thought it was a fascinating movie. I like that it goes different places and that the centerpieces aren't just these walkabouts, but there's a very long climax in a hotel room that's really the stuff that reminded me of Marriage Story.
Yeah,
These two
I
characters
figured.
kind of ripping into each other. And it's only a point of comparison in that they are kind of similar scenes about similar things, but I'm not saying I have a favorite because I think both, were executed really well. So when did you saw this when it first came out, I take it?
Let me think. This came out in 2013. I may have seen it 2013. I was in New York. Yeah, I think I saw it here. I'm not sure if I saw it at a theater or if I saw it. It must have been the theater, right? Because they didn't have streaming back then. So
Right.
yeah. I think I either I saw it at the theater or soon after. And let me think. Yeah, I think I saw it at the theater. Now that I think of it, I remember from the first viewing that great scene where the group is eating in on that island or that coast of Greece. Beautiful, right? What'd you think about the cinematography in Greece?
I thought it was great. And I think I need to watch this. I'm going to watch the whole trilogy again at some point, but I really wanted to pay attention to the filmmaking in the Greece walking scenes, not so much the dinner scenes, but it's the later scenes where Jesse and Céline are walking from this kind of artist or writer's villa that they've been staying in all summer to a hotel that some of the other guests have offered to put them up for the night, is sort of a, hey, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really long walk, and a lot of these scenes are the takes are very long and the
Mm-hmm.
cuts are very subtle. So I don't know how much of that was actually continuous. I can only imagine, they wrote this script, but I'm never really sure how much of it is written versus improv. And they've got someone on set, like writing down what they say in case they need to do another take. They remember what they were talking about, or if they just make stuff up all over again on the spot. But it was just very impressive how I know I'm watching a fictional movie with fictional characters, but it just feels so real what's coming out of these characters' mouths.
Yeah, good filmmaking skills right there. I
Hmm.
think most of it, if not all of it, is rehearsed, written and rehearsed, and then they shoot it. So I think there's very little, improvisation in those three movies.
But in that, when you say uh, written and rehearsed, do you get the sense that it is well, because all three people get the writing credit. So
Hmm.
I'm wondering if in the rehearsals it's sort of like Linklater and Delpy and Hawke walking around. Linklater say, okay, now you talk about the kids. Now you talk about, you thought he was having an affair. Now you talk about, whatever, writer's block, I don't know. And then they just kind of go off on that and they take note of what they were talking about, and that becomes the script.
No, I saw and heard in an interview with Ethan Hawke that during the writing, all three contribute ideas and they mold it into a final script with Linklater leading. But once the writing is done, Linklater says, "Okay, now go be actors. I'm the director. From now on, you guys are just acting." And then they go into their roles and they learn the lines and they act it out. So I don't think there's, from what I've heard, who knows exactly what happens on the set. From what I've heard, there isn't a lot of rewriting when shooting this movie, and also I think that kind of makes sense to not, just to make it, just to keep things in place,
Hmm.
not to have actors improvise, because some stuff that is supposed to come out later in the movie may come out early. That'll create an editing problem. I've learned that in having rehearsal and having improvisation in scripted movies. It's better to do one or the other. That
Mm.
if it's memorized written dialogue, that comes out a certain way, and then you can hand out the information at a certain pace. So, but maybe one day we'll talk to those three on the show.
Oh, that would be amazing. Well, I think you might have pointed this out in the last one, that given that this is 2013 and we are now in
Mm-hmm.
2021, we're just about due for, you know,
Mm-hmm.
another one. Was it going to be before breakfast? I have no idea what it'd be.
After COVID.
After, yeah.
Or during COVID. But
Oh,
and one thing that we should mention is that these movies make money. From the reported numbers that I looked up today, Before Midnight cost 3 million to make, and it made something like 20+ million. Those are good numbers for a small movie,
yeah. I mean,
and
even if
that's just theatrical.
right, and I mean, even factoring in, I don't know how much, I don't know how marketing works for these smaller uh, films. I know for like
Yeah,
the
I'm not sure how much
blockbuster.
they spent on that.
Yeah, because the blockbusters, they say that you take the budget of the film and you spend just about the same amount
Yeah,
on marketing. But for indies, I don't know if it's the same. But even if you say the marketing alone costs $3 million, which whatever, you're still talking about a profit of 14+ million.
yeah,
That's
that's great.
incredible.
Yeah.
It also shows the sort of the fandom and the respect that this
Hmm.
trilogy has built over the last 2 decades now, 25 years. It's really impressive and cool. And it'll be interesting to see if and how people come back for the next one.
Hmm. What Yeah, this movie felt like the least romantic of the three, as far as sort of an escapist thing and most like real life. And a lot of the arguments, I think a lot of couples who've been together for a long time, especially creative or half creative couples,
Mm.
can probably relate to. And I have similar, maybe not as intense arguments happen quite often around these parts. So
Oh,
so and you living with wife and kids, you might have similar arguments may have come up in the past.
you know what? Specific arguments. That's the other thing about, I said I'm trying to process this movie is, uh, you know, when you're living your life and you're interacting with people, you're in a relationship and you think that you're unique, that your problems are your own, and maybe you start to feel nobody else has these same, foibles, these same issues with their spouse or whatever. And then you watch something like this and you're like, how did they find out? Was Richard Linklater spying on me? Wait, no, he couldn't have, because he made this film years ago, but it speaks to
Mhm.
something that's happening, contemporarily, if that's a word, uh, with my life, and I could identify it, down to some of the creative uh, insecurities that happen between Jesse and Celine. One of the weird things is this movie came out in 2013. In 2012, Ethan Hawke was the star of a horror movie called Sinister. I don't
Mhm.
know if you ever checked that out, but
No, I haven't seen it.
it's pretty damn good. And that's like the horror movie version of what Jesse is going through in this film. He was a
Okay,
young,
interesting.
yeah, he was a young hotshot writer who made it big with a couple of books. And then in later years, once he's got a wife and a daughter, his career is sort of on the slide and he's kind of taking whatever he can get. And of course, this demon shows up and there's like problems. Uh, the ending of that movie is really creepy and effective. But it's like he got into this groove. It had to have been a coincidence, but I almost feel like this could be a nice little double feature with with Sinister, because at least Before Midnight ends on a note of hope. But
Mhm.
man, that is a 0 hour note of hope, because I was conscious of the time. I'm watching this. I rented it on Amazon, and I
Right.
see how close that bar is getting to the very end of the runtime. I'm like, they don't look happy.
Mhm.
And it's not that it's necessarily a happy ending, but it's at least a hopeful one, because they have this big drag down blowout fight in their hotel room, and then they kind of meet in the patio section of the hotel restaurant, and yeah, they have it out again, but
Mhm.
in sort of a more subtle way, because they're in public, which was very interesting.
Yeah, it's about that previous movie that you mentioned. Yeah, when a demon shows up, usually trouble happens. It'll be
Yes.
it would be interesting if a demon shows up and it's all chill after that.
Before Seance.
That's
um
right. And also, Hawk was in another movie not too long ago where he's sort of a has-been rock star, and then there's a fan, in another country in Europe maybe, and then he visits. He has a fling with this female fan. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. And I'm blanking on it, but I think it was based on a Nick Hornby novel.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah, it's up on my shelf. I talked about it on the podcast, actually, with my wife
Awesome.
as
What's
a
the
special
title?
episode. I don't remember.
Okay,
I'll have
okay.
to, I'll have to look that up. I'll leave a link in the show notes to whatever
Nice.
that was. I remember that being a case where the novel was really sharp and the movie was just kind of like,
So
eh,
so.
yeah. But
Yeah.
I'm finding that a lot with books. You can get a lot deeper into characters than what filmmakers, no matter what their intentions are, can sometimes bring out in a 90-minute runtime.
Yeah. To do these things, these super realistic things well, takes a lot of skill, uh, and it shows because so few of these things are out, on a sort of a large scale. I mean, there aren't like 10 Richard Linklaters. Um, he does, this focus on real world events in a really interesting way. Not like a documentary, but not hyper fictionalized either. So I like the sort of the middle ground that he walks. From Slacker, he was doing it. Some of maybe two or three of his other movies, they were shot and cut more like regular Hollywood movies. Maybe I think Newton Boys and some other, like maybe Suburbia, didn't feel like regular Linklater, but Slacker, And then these three movies felt, they all have a certain, observing real life, telling a story slowly, but definitely done by an author, definitely done by a filmmaker type vibe to me.
And even, I agree. And even a movie we'll be talking about coming up on this show soon, Waking Life.
Hmm.
If you remove the animated aesthetic and just imagine that you're watching the raw footage of, however many stories they have going on there, it is just kind of like floating through, catching up with people talking about, philosophy and life and stuff. And yeah, it's probably all scripted, but it feels authentic to each of those voices.
Hmm.
It's crazy to think that Alex Jones was in there for for a little bit. I think he was driving a cop car, screaming into the the mouthpiece or whatever. But
he might have been less toxic back in the day.
yeah, maybe. Mm,
Oh, I mean, since we had our last meeting, the government almost got overthrown. So that's crazy.
yeah,
So that took a couple of days off from my editing project. I'm like, oh, let's see what's going on in DC. Especially since I grew up near DC and I worked in the Hill doing audio and video recording. Yeah, I know a lot of the places that they showed. So I was like, wow, this is insane.
yeah. Well, people thought they were going to get out of, and I was kind of one of them, getting out of 2020, fresh start in 2021.
Hmm.
And, uh, it's a cliche to say that 2021 said, hold my beer, but it apparently, apparently that's where we are. And it's also interesting to look back on the quaint, faraway time of 2013,
That's right.
um, because Celine has always been a very politically minded, globally minded character. And to hear her talking about how awful things are in 2013. Now, I didn't see when this came out,
I
because
think
I
it was
know,
mid 2013.
was it mid 2013? Okay.
Yes.
Because there are a lot of references, they're Bush era references, which makes
Hmm.
sense if Linklater was putting this together, before the 2012 election, when they were still at the tail end of the Bush administration, a lot of awfulness going there, possibly unsure who was going to be in that seat of power in the
Yeah.
next year, because there's like references to Cheney and Rumsfeld, and America does not get it gets kind of short shrift in terms of the way it's talked about. Even
Hmm.
Chicago,
Yeah, right.
hometown.
Lots of
Um,
Chicago references.
yes.
I like the way she said. I like the way she said Chicago.
I don't. It's like
Yeah,
it feels like I'm being slapped in the face, and
that's right.
I'm not even the town.
Right.
But yeah, it was just, it's cool to see the evolution of this character. And also, in I think the first film, we saw a bit of that kind of, strident feminist kind of personality coming out of Céline, and Jesse just thought it was kind of cute, and he didn't
Hmm.
really, he would kind of give her, rib her about certain stuff, but he just kind of accepted it. Towards the end of this film, uh, the ideas that she's got swimming around in her head about, masculine, feminine roles, the idea of being a wife and a mother, she doesn't really take to it. It's revealed that the twins that they had were an accident that she
Hmm.
never really recovered from. Um, and the key difference here is that Jesse's character is at a different place in his life, and he's just not taking it anymore. Possibly because they've been together for 8 years or whatever. They haven't had that decade-long break where they forget the stuff that kind of annoys each other. They've just been joined at the hip, and now they're joined at the hip with kids. It was just a fascinating dynamic, and something that really, I think, sets this movie apart from the other two.
Hmm. Yeah, about her complaints, I agree. I mean, it is easier, from my perspective, to be Jesse than to be the Celine character with her. The amount of time she has to spend with the kids. I mean, mothers spend more time with the kids, I think, generally, and also try to have a career. And when your mate is, much more famous, and he sounds like Jesse gets to put a lot of time into his work as needed, travel. and taking daily time out. So just from my own experience, and what I've observed about male female couples who are creative, I kind of agree with all the complaints that Céline has, even though there's probably much better ways to work out that situation. I mean, on the positive side, Jesse seems like a very accommodating guy. He moved to Paris, left the U.S. behind. So, but even then, from what I heard, the three writers pulled some of their real life experiences, right,
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
into this project. So I can't imagine Linklater having problems with his significant other. Maybe he does. Same with the other two, as self-aware as they are about the fact. I mean, since they made the last two movies, they must know when they live their regular life. Oh, some of this might end up in the next movie. I better watch it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as Celine's complaints, you know, she is a fictional character. Um, they may be drawing on real life experiences, uh, but I was relieved to see her get some pushback on some of this stuff because
Hmm.
Jesse brings up some good points too. You know, when she complains, like, and you're always going off on your book tours and going off on your, writing retreats and whatever, the book tours is part of usually a contract with a publisher that, he's getting paid to write these books and he's bringing in
Hmm.
an income. She's working for some kind of a, nonprofit concern. At the beginning of the film, she's talking about leaving that to get a
Hmm.
government job because it's more, stable and could actually go places. So I understand the complaint, but it's like, well, what do you want to do? I mean, do you want to go out and get, she's already, and he says this, you go to work at, I drop off, you drop off the kids at school. I pick them up. I'm home with them. You come home at 6 o'clock. So he's doing, you know, I have to imagine he's doing some kind of like housework or some sort of the chores. He's not just off in his cabin
Hmm.
being creative all day. It
Hmm.
seems like an equal distribution of labor. Her concern seems to be more that when she had the kids, she had to give up her own creative ambitions to a certain
Yeah.
extent to be a mother, and she just
Yeah.
feels unprepared for it. And that honesty, I think, is something that's some of the most moving parts of the film, because you realize they made a decision to have the kids. They love the kids, but they also love themselves and they feel a certain amount of guilt, especially Celine. Like when she reveals that she's thought about or tried committing suicide on a number of occasions, which feels like it's news to Jesse. I'm like, it was a splash of cold water in my face for sure.
Yeah. That's we're seeing different sides of the characters. The first movie was very hopeful about the future, very romantic. Second movie, sort of the bohemian middle age, hanging out in Paris. Uh, that was that was more of a fantasy. This one is like the cold hard reality of trying to get things done. Um, having written scripts and editing stuff, just the time it takes, I can see Jesse having large blocks of time to himself, especially since that's his job, and he can justify saying, well, it makes us money, so I need to do it.
Hmm.
The problem for Céline is her creative passions did not turn into a money making career thus far. So so that's one of her complaints. He gets to do the art thing that he's passionate about. She doesn't. Um,
And I think
so
that
I
comes
mean,
back to,
there's no right or wrong. I mean, that's just how things turn out. What are you going to do, right? So.
well, what you can do is something that they have not done, um, which is, and he makes again a decent point. She's a decent point, not articulated the best way. He says if you spent, I think like an eighth of the passion that you spend into complaining and bitching about stuff, I think those were his words, into, writing music or being creative, you would have, something amazing. Uh, the problem, I think, is that she needs to stand up for herself and say, look, I need the time to do
Hmm.
this. I need
Hmm.
you to take an extra shift or not go on this writer's retreat to watch the girls. I need a day out of the week, or I need like a half a day on the weekends to go off to my own cabin and make music or whatever. But she hasn't articulated this. She's kept it bottled up, along with the, postpartum depression that's lasted for 8 years or whatever it is. Um, so it's kind of on her to communicate. It's also on him to notice that there's something that she's not communicating.
Hmm.
And I think this all comes out at the very end of the film. And one of the things I love about this movie is, it is like, you're right, it's all bubbly romance and butterflies in the first two films. We start to see shades of reality creeping in the middle of Before Sunset. But in Before Midnight, we come to find out what real love actually means, and sticking it out is hard work, especially if you've got these kind of big blow up moments that you have to fight through if you're going to stay together. Because when she stormed out of the room at the end of this film and the climax, that very well could have been the end of their relationship. He comes out to try and salvage things in sort of this clumsy way, ends up bringing them back from the brink, or at least she does, because she decides to to accept his ridiculous gesture.
Hmm.
But I'm very curious to see where this ends up. If the next movie is 10 years into the future, they're both 50 years old or 50-ish, and maybe they've been apart for half a decade, and they
That would
happen
be
to
interesting.
and they run into each other in a train in Vienna or something.
Yeah, that would be interesting if they separated, and then in the fourth movie, they're on a date or something, and they're trying to get back together, or they try to make it happen, but it doesn't work. That would be interesting to see what they do. I wonder whose life experiences are in Before Midnight. I don't know who, if any of the three have been divorced or and remarried, blah blah blah. I don't know about their personal histories, but it would
I
be
th-
interesting to see. Maybe it's Linklaters.
well, I mean, I'm not sure on the timeline, but I know Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman famously
Oh,
were
right,
married for a while, and,
right.
and they'd been
Hmm.
divorced. I think they were apart at the time of this movie.
Hmm.
Um, and that's an interesting dynamic, because they're both actors, so I can only imagine their lives are probably even 10 times crazier than what we see in this movie. Um, but yeah, going back to what we were talking about earlier, I appreciate that we don't have. It would be nice to see more movies like this out there, but the fact that we only have one Richard Linklater making these specific kinds of movies makes
Hmm.
them stand out and draws a
True.
great contrast to the kind of BS rom-com dramas that we see from the mainstream.
Hmm. I was thinking it would be interesting to see female filmmakers make work similar to. I mean, Lisa, I forget her last name, how to pronounce her last name, Cholodenko. Do you know that filmmaker?
I don't know. Can you name some films she's done?
Friends with Money, I think, was one.
Mm-mm.
Do you know that one?
No.
Uh, Her style is similar, but a little bit more like a regular movie. But yeah, look up that movie, Friends with Money, and her earlier work.
I'm
And I
writing it
might be,
down.
yeah, I might be mispronouncing her last name, but she has a similar, give reality its due, sort of detached, observe real people type style. But it would be interesting if there were more minority and female filmmakers you working in the style and had the opportunities that Linklater had, because we don't really get to see the African American experience, told in this way yet. It may happen. Maybe it's happening on TV, and maybe it's already happened, and you and I just haven't seen it. But yeah, because it's a big country with lots of different kinds of people, and it'll be interesting. Well, also I would like to see some historical stuff happen in sort of this kind of real way, because I feel like when we watch, Revolutionary era, Lincoln era stuff, they're they're picking the high points, sort of the historical book version of the story. I want to see like the everyday nonsense they had to deal with in those eras.
Well, and we don't have to turn this into that conversation, but at some point, if you haven't watched it, we should talk about it on this podcast or a different one. Do you have Amazon? Are you an
I have
Amazon?
Amazon. I have
Okay.
Prime. Yeah.
All right. It just came out on Friday. One Night in Miami, Regina
Okay, yeah,
King's movie.
yeah.
I watched it yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
or I finished it yesterday. I watched it in two sittings. That is, first of all, it's a masterpiece. It's one of those weird situations where all four of the lead actors, I feel, could dominate the four best actor, four of the best actor slots, and
Awesome.
possibly even set a precedent for awarding the top best actor slot to four actors.
That's awesome.
But I don't know if you know what that movie is about, but it's One Night in Miami in 1964. It's Muhammad Ali, uh, Jim Brown, Malcolm X, and Sam Cooke
Hmm.
hanging out in a hotel room talking about their lives and the issues of the day.
Awesome.
And uh, I think it's Kingsley Belladir, if I have that right. He plays Malcolm X in a way that I haven't seen him portrayed in a film before. That I'm not going to say quieter because it is a very dramatic performance, but
Hmm.
the more human side, the guy that you don't see when the cameras are on. Now,
Hmm.
it's a fictitious, or it's a narrative film. It's not a documentary or docudrama, as far as I know, but it feels very realistic in a lot of ways. So yeah, to what you're saying, I was thinking about this, and I may have shared this when David Fowley and I were talking about the first two Trip movies,
Hmm.
that we were commenting on how it would be great to see different types of people take on the subject matter of two you know black friends, two women, to whatever,
Hmm.
not I'm going to throw in this phrase, not just two white guys jumping in a car and driving across the country, but some different
Hmm.
voices jumping in a car and
Right.
driving across the country. What does that week look like?
Hmm.
um and I think Linklater really has set the ground for that being possible, and also a commercial success.
Right. Yeah. When I was writing or thinking about doing my movie, The Secret Society for Slow Romance, the fact that Linklater's movies were a success critically and financially, and the fact that My Dinner with Andre existed, that really helped me, to narrow down and choose. Yeah, it's possible to do something like this and have some sort of success, where people will be like, "Why are we watching this?" there's, there's precedent. The positive take is, yeah, Linklater doing these movies sort of becomes a genre of its own, the before type movie genre, and that allows other people, different kinds of people, to make similar movies. Also, I mean, the white demographic is not a monolith. We could have. It would be interesting to see a similar kind of story about non-creative, people, and their lives, how, in following them over a number of years.
Well, watching One Night in Miami reminded me of another film from 2000, I think 2001, called The Big Kahuna.
Hmm.
Both films are based on stage plays, and this, Big Kahuna is about three businessmen in a hotel in Kansas during a
Hmm.
convention.
Hmm.
It's Kevin Spacey, Danny DeVito, and Peter Facinelli. Wonderful film, and it's all dialogue. It's like 12
Hmm.
Angry Men, except it's three frustrated salesmen. Um,
Nice.
yeah, but I would like to see more movies like that, especially now in an era where we're all more connected than ever via social media, but we're
Right.
also so disconnected, partially because of social media, partially because of the pandemic. I feel like these more human and intimate stories, kind of like what I was saying beforehand about how Richard Linklater seems to know what's going on in my house, even though I've never met him.
Right.
I feel like having more people feel like they're seen and heard and understood can only be a good thing. I don't care about the Fast and the Furious or the next, great Marvel blockbuster. I want to see an emotional blockbuster.
Yeah, stuff that people can relate to, that reflects their lives. I think maybe in England, English television, BBC, etc., I think maybe they do more of that. The Up series, that filmmaker died recently. I forget his name. They followed,
Was it
maybe,
Mike Lee?
I don't think it was Mike Lee. I'm
No,
not
why don't?
sure.
Okay.
Anyway, it's a series called Up, and they followed a group of people every 7 years, I think. And
Mhm.
I think maybe they have done like 5 or so movies, catching up with them. What about the before type of show, before type of project as a TV series? What do you think about that?
I think it would have to be handled very specifically, and you'd have to have. I don't know who would put it on because I
No,
mean,
I
if
mean,
you,
yeah. Go ahead.
I like the idea of it. Are you talking about something that is sort of in the vein of the Before series, where it's scripted but it feels very realistic, but it's
No, no,
also
like no, just Richard Linklater and this team doing, instead of cramming in events of number of years into one day. We just see number of days in a given month or a year in this couple's life, or
hmm.
similar work.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see that particular voice get put onto the screen. I mean, there's so many dramas and reality shows on TV that I think it would be hard to stand out. I mean, I think you and I
Hmm.
would tune into something like that. If we saw
Right,
like
right.
NBC presents the new Richard Linklater series, we'd be all
That's
over
right.
it,
That's
right?
right.
But other people like, who the hell's Richard Linklater?
That's right. Yeah, it's kind of both Linklater and Hawke in the U.S. and I don't know what Delphi's status is in France, but those two guys in the U.S. are kind of like low-key superstars. Like Linklater has made a bunch of movies, but he's not talked about in the mainstream press like Spielberg and what's his name? Ethan Hawke has made a lot of movies, and he's been pretty good in a lot of them.
Yeah,
But he's not talked in the same level as Tom Cruise, for example.
that may be changing. And Ethan Hawke's had a fascinating career. He started off as sort of a child actor, then
Hmm.
he evolved into this teen to slash early 20s heartthrob with like Reality Bites and other films like that. And now he's making these really interesting movies. He had his directorial debut a few years ago with a movie called Blaze, which I thought was pretty fantastic, really nice
Hmm.
and slow.
Yeah,
Um,
looked unusual.
right. And I just saw before he got on that he has signed,
Yeah, to
speaking of
play Moon
Marvel,
Knight.
yeah,
Yeah,
is he playing Moon Knight?
I
I,
don't know.
I saw that he's attached to the series. So
Yeah.
maybe now people would be, if that show takes off or that movie or whatever, and Ethan Hawke is prominent, they'll be like, oh my God, Ethan Hawke is back. And so if he and Linklater decide to do TV, like their own
Right.
series, then that cachet will transfer over to that. Best of all possible worlds.
It might be possible. Amazon or Netflix, maybe HBO Max. Let's see. It seems like a Netflix project. But about acting in Before Sunrise, Hawk said he learned a lot about acting by acting in that movie because prior to that he was a matinee idol. He was like a movie star from his previous movies. Linklater said, "No, no, don't do any of that stuff." He kept shutting down any of the posing, actorly, movie star things that he was doing. He's like, "No, no, don't look that way. More real, more real." So, I think maybe being in these movies have helped his career
Yeah, and it's weird
in a
because
different way.
right, but and I'd be curious to see how that advice affected his real life personality. I mentioned Blaze. I actually saw an early screening in Chicago of that
Hmm.
film, and he came out to do a Q&A. So I got to, see him talk for 45 minutes or an hour or whatever it was. And it's weird because I saw a lot of the Jesse character in him,
Hmm.
but I also maybe it's because he is who he is. He's a Hollywood actor. He's got a lot of famous friends and a lot of wealth. So when he's talking about stuff, I'm just imagining him talking about everyday things, but in the context of a giant mansion. It was weird.
Could be
It was not like a put on. It was just kind of like a, yeah.
interesting. What are some of my other notes? Oh, did you catch that Henry Miller line when she was angry and she was like, you're no Henry Miller in any kind of sense." That
I
was rough.
I wrote that down, and that was another key detail is sometimes, especially when you're in a long-term relationship with someone, and when you're past that honeymoon period, literally or figuratively, you don't say everything that's on your mind, and then
That's
things
right.
just kind of get tucked away to come out at the opportune time to unleash something horrible. uh I
I
definitely
was
felt the sting of that. Yeah.
I was thinking myself, no, that's too far. Don't say that. I was advising Céline, nope, this is going to be tough to walk back. But it could easily be discounted, saying she was saying, oh, I just wanted to say something that would hurt you, and obviously, they've been living together for a long time, and they seem to get back together at the end. Obviously, things aren't that bad.
Right, but what I loved is that she had no intention, and Linklater and Delpy and Hawke had no intention of letting her walk it back
Right, right.
in that moment. That was like she threw that out there knowing that was going to cut his heart out to some extent, whether or not it showed on his face or not. That was the kill shot. Now, after they have this crazy wild night of sex that is apparently foretold in a napkin letter from the future,
Hmm.
maybe they'll joke about it or something in bed the next morning, or maybe they'll revisit it, and in, before brunch or whatever the next movie is, after they've been broken up, they're going to be talking to each other and be like, uh, yeah, you wouldn't let that Henry Miller thing go. I knew that was the end.
um, I wonder whose real life that line came from. I can't imagine someone telling Linklater he's not as successful as X director. He's such a unique, you know, director. I can see some other filmmaker being told, "You're no Richard Linklater." But so, and Delphi, I don't know how famous. I don't know exactly what her position in France is, but maybe that line came from Ethan Hawke's real life, because he made a movie once. I mean, he made a movie way back in the 90s, no, early 2000s, and it wasn't well received. Uh, I think maybe it was called Hotel Chelsea. Chelsea.
Hotel Chelsea, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. It wasn't well received. So maybe one of his partners was like, "You're no ex actor, or you're no ex director."
That's entirely possible. I don't know, or it could just be, a fabrication of them sitting
True.
around, like coming up with like, oh, what could she say to him during this like crazy fight, and they might have had a really good time
Hmm.
coming up with the Henry Miller line, because as much as it hurt, I was like, damn, that's really brilliant, because it's
Yeah, well
attacking him
thought
on
out.
two different distinct fronts. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder if the Jesse character might go in the future. You know what? Uh, I wonder if he feels like being in this relationship and writing about it has held him back from growing as an author. And in the future, if they separate and he has to tackle new subjects, I wonder if that would give him more creative satisfaction and more professional accomplishments. So he could say, I mean, one of his complaints could be, yeah, his writing, like two of his most well-known books are about her and that relationship. So maybe he could have some regrets about that also.
Well, because the third book had, a garishly long title. It was like Fiona
Hmm.
Apple's follow-up album to Title, which was like a paragraph long title.
Hmm.
I think that was also about the relationship as well, because I remember when he was talking to his author friends, and one was the patron who was hosting this retreat, said that he liked it. The problem, I understand what you're saying, but I think the problem Jesse has is that when he gets away from writing about his real life, writing what he knows, it's kind of awful, because
Hmm.
he spends the first, half hour of this movie pitching ideas that he's been jotting down to all of his writer friends. And they're like, sure.
Right.
But I understand the impulse to want to get away from, I'm not just the autobiography guy, but, there is something possibly satisfying. I love the scene with the hotel concierge,
Hmm.
who comes up to him and says, my husband and I fell in love reading your books. Would you please sign the first two? And I noticed it was just the first two and not the third
Right.
one.
Right.
And that awkward position that Céline was in, because the lady was like, would you sign them too? And she's like,
She's like, I'm not in it.
right. And then he's like, oh, she'd be happy to sign. That
That's
was
right.
it was a warm moment followed up immediately by a horribly awkward one. Like, this is going to lead to trouble very soon.
Yeah,
And sure enough, it
yeah.
did.
Yes, it looked realistic between the public and a creative couple and an author, because I think I may have done stuff like that myself on a much smaller scale. When I'm out with Amanda and someone talks to me about a movie, and we would stop everything and talk for like 10-15 minutes. She's like, okay, we had other plans. Let's go do. So I'm sure that kind of stuff happened in a lot of creative people's lives. Um,
I'm
let's
doubly
see.
guilty. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. Oh, I think we should give extra credit to Julie Delpy, because it's two male voices, two very creative, established male voices in the U.S. versus her when they're in the writing room, trying to figure out what to put in the script. So it's possible that she has to work hard to get her ideas in.
Well, this is something that didn't think about until you just put it that way. How much of the Céline character is Julie Delpy and her thoughts about the world versus what Linklater might have picked up from the girl that this is actually based on
Hmm.
versus his ideas of the girl that is actually based on, as well as an archetypal character.
Hmm.
This kind of militant feminism that I talked about earlier, is this a male? Is this what a man thinks a woman is going to think about men, and so they kind of put it into this creative script? Or is this Julie Delpy kind of reflecting, putting her stamp? Like, I'm trying to articulate what I'm saying. Is this her voice, or is this a man's version of what they think a woman would think, and
I don't.
her kind of rolling within those parameters?
Mhm. I didn't think the feminism was militant or extreme. I think it was just regular feminism in these movies. I think it only looks. It might shock us a little because it's so rarely directly addressed and directly talked about in the kind of
Well,
movies over the last couple of decades.
when I say militant, I just mean that there is maybe bitterness is the best
Hmm.
term, a
Hmm.
better way to look at it.
Right.
Because okay, she does at some point need a man, and she respects the man that she's with to a certain
Right.
degree, and she loves him, and she decided to have the kids. She could have just said, I'm accidentally pregnant, I'm not doing this.
Right.
So they stayed together. So yeah, I'll walk that back. But I guess the bitterness and the frustration and rage that comes out is directed, I think, at a lot of her own feelings about how she is taken a back seat to
Yeah.
Jesse in a lot of ways, which is unfair. She understands that's unfair to herself, but a lot of the language comes out in
Hmm.
"you men always do this, men
Yeah.
are like
Yeah.
this, men just think with their dicks," that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I
um
think that might be Delpy. Delpy. Is it Delpy or Delphi?
I think it's Delpy.
Okay, that might be Delpy, because that might be coming from her, because I read some interviews with her. She was in a famous movie. I mean, in a movie by a famous director as a teenager or something, and then it took her a long time to. She wanted to direct from the beginning. It took her a very long time to get the chance to direct. And last time I read, she wasn't happy with how difficult it is for her to come by with the opportunity to make a movie. So uh, from the review interviews I read, it sounds like a lot of the complaints may be coming from Delphi.
Okay. And yeah, I was just posing a genuine question. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not doubting if it is not a genuine voice, it certainly sounds like one.
Hmm.
But what you were talking about, a woman's perspective, kind of working within the parameters of these two male, co-creators, I was
Hmm.
just wondering how much of that was her working with what she's given and doing the best she can with it versus them sitting together at a table saying, okay, you create the character of Céline. She's based on my kind of romantic experiences,
Hmm.
Richard Linklater might be saying. But again, from what I know, that relationship that was kind of dealt with in the first film, maybe the
Hmm.
first two films, kind of, but
Yeah.
we're in sort of new territory here with this third film. So she may have had a lot more license to figure out where Céline would be emotionally this at this point in her life.
Yeah, the second film also I think they co-wrote. So I want to say, even though they're equally credited more or less, it's probably 50% Linklater and 50% Ethan Hawke, and then with Celine 50% Delpy, because the director knows exactly what he's trying to get to. So he probably, and I mean, they're not equals when it comes to this, because Linklater as the director has the power to shape it, edit it however they want. So I'm sure when the project begins, even though they say they're equals, there's some deference to what Linklater wants to do. So I think I can imagine it being tough for for Julie Delpy to get her ideas across. But on the other hand, as I discovered in making my movie, when it's two or three people making a movie, it's more of a democracy. It's, you could be like, well, obviously these two partners have to be happy, or the other person in the movie has to be happy. So I'm more open to ideas from the only other person in the movie, as opposed to 16 other people that I have to deal with.
And that makes a lot of sense too, because especially the type of movie that you're making, and the type of movie that Linklater is putting together with these films, they are so dependent on authentic emotion and experience, or the closest that you can get in a fictitious context, that
Mm-hmm.
if someone raises their hand and says, women don't talk like that, or
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that Celine, being this point in her life, would act like that or think, say this at this moment. Linklater, I don't know him, but I would imagine he's not gonna be like, shut up, this is my vision.
Right, right, right.
Of course she would, that kind
Right,
of a
right,
thing.
right. It's not one of those movies.
Right.
Yeah, no. And one of the reasons there aren't more Linklaters might be because it's difficult. That it takes an amazing amount of skill to develop this kind of filmmaking skills and to develop that kind of career.
Well, we're at the end of this trilogy, so I want to go back to the beginning for a bit. And again, I just watched these movies starting in November, so my history with them is not that deep. Linklater, when he came out with Before Sunrise, would that movie have become what it did without Ethan Hawke's sort of star power?
I think so. I think him being a star, helped a lot with the ticket sales. But that movie and the other movies, I think, were Academy Award nominated. Uh, Regardless of the star, I think people would have realized, the industry would have recognized the excellence of the work, because uh, I can't think of anyone like Linklater, that kind of a voice, as shown in Slacker and these three other movies, existing prior to his time, right? In American mainstream film history. I can't really think of anyone who's made movies like this. Can you?
No, I'm not saying. I guess what I'm getting at is, what had he done before this? He did Slacker. Was there
He
anything
did
between
Slacker.
Slacker and then Before Sunrise? Were those his first two outings, or was there anything in between?
I think this is a chance to. I think he might have done a couple of studio movies, like Dazed and Confused.
Oh, that was '93. That's right. Okay.
Yeah, he might have done Dazed and Confused. Maybe Before Sunrise was the third one or the fourth one. But
Yeah.
certainly in terms of style, it's similar to Slacker, where it's just a camera observing, except it's two people. So I can't think of, maybe someone who knows film history better can bring up something. But I mean, we're pretty good observers of the film scene. I can't think of any movie like Before Sunrise prior to that movie making it at that level, becoming popular at that level.
And you know what? I think Dazed and Confused is the key. I can't believe I blanked on that one.
Hmm.
Linklater is kind of like the Coen brothers, in that when you think of a Coen brothers movie, you can think of like, oh yeah, they're the guys who did No Country for Old Men. But then you're like, oh, they also did Raising Arizona. They're impossible to nail down in terms of a genre, so you can easily skip over stuff. Dazed and
Right.
Confused is so different from, kind of like, I imagine, Slacker or Before. It's a bigger movie with what went on to become a huge cast.
Hmm.
So yeah, I can see how that movie, because that was a success when it came out,
Right.
would have given him the cachet to do a Before Sunrise. So I was thinking that the Hawk thing would sort of give it a profile that if it had just been Joe Blow, indie actor,
Hmm.
possibly delivering the same caliber of performance, but because he has that name on the poster, because
Right.
Julie Delpy was not, I don't think, known over here in
Not
the
known.
States at that
No.
point.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of fun to think about. I am glad that he was cast in this film because, as you mentioned, this sort of represented a turning point, I think, in terms of his career. I think Ethan
Yeah.
Hawke is much more interesting now in his older career than he was back when he was starting out.
Hmm. It's 10 o'clock. Time to wrap up.
Sure.
Or if you want to keep going, that's fine.
Are you saying that I'm chatterboxing too much? What are you
No, no,
getting at
no.
here?
No, usually you have very strict ins and outs. You're like 40 minutes, 1 hour, we got to get done.
Well, I wasn't sure how much ground we could cover talking about Before Midnight. It turns out this has been a perfect chance to summarize the entire thing and go into
There you go.
territories beyond. So I'm thrilled. I'm also happy to wrap up because I've been up since 4 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
as we've discussed.
Right.
You're just getting started. This is like your 10 a.m., right?
Yeah, I think I'm going to do, yeah, it's been a weird day. I haven't gotten a lot of work done, but I think I'll edit from like, it's 10 o'clock in New York now till maybe 2 or 3 and go to bed
All
and pick
right.
up tomorrow. Yeah, I'm trying to get the movie done and submitted to Cinequest. That's a good festival, and there's a bunch of other fest deadlines coming up. So, looking forward to it. I think you'll enjoy the movie. I think even most of a mainstream audience might dig it. The segments go by fast. It doesn't feel like slow cinema. Uh, is there anything else you want to say about the previous two movies that we didn't cover in this series?
No, I think we've done a pretty good job of covering them. Maybe in a couple years when I go back and I binge the trilogy again, we can pick up on it, or maybe I'll binge it when the fourth movie comes out. We can come back and talk about that, maybe with Alia. But yeah, I think we've done a pretty good job of doing this Before trilogy justice.
And if the three principals from the movie are watching this, they probably are like going, "These guys have it all wrong. This is
In which
not
case,
at all."
in which case, I humbly and graciously invite you to come on the Slowdown
Yes,
and talk with us and tell
yes.
us what we got wrong.
Yeah, anytime, Richard Linklater, Ethan Hawke, Julie Delpy, come
Yeah.
on the show. We'll do a special episodes.
Yes, kickseat@gmail.com. You can reach out to me.
There we go.
We'll set it up. But all right, Sujewa, thank you very much for suggesting that we talk about these. I think it was your idea, or at least it came up in
Might have been.
conversation, and I was like, I'd never seen those movies. So
Might have
yeah,
been.
this has been a lot of fun, and I look forward to next month to talk about slow romance and possibly Godard. I'll figure that out with the calendar.
Hmm.
But until then, yeah, good luck tonight. Drink lots of coffee or Red Bull or however you plow through that stuff. What is your secret to staying up these crazy hours?
Black tea, no sugar, so healthy.
All right. I
Yeah.
I got to get on the healthy train. I'm a black coffee guy all the way.
Oh,
But
good. But I can't drink more than a number of coffee cups a day. It becomes kind of tasteless and bitter after like the fourth cup. So,
I'm on a pot number 2.5 for today.
wow, that's good.
Yeah. No, it's
Yeah,
not good. Not at all. I don't recommend it. But all right. On that note, I'll let you go, and we'll talk next month.
sounds good. Talk to you soon.
All right. Take care. Bye.